On today's episode, we talk to our older brother.
Guess who's back?
Yeah, it's Cappaulli. So listen in. We're going to talk about how this voyage to the funeral profession is going for him moving in next to the funeral home,
I'm back in the 48140, baby.
and much, much
More.
Listen in.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about grief and mourning. Is it argumental or existential? What's it mean to me? Let's talk about death.
Hi, I'm Benny Cappaulli, and I'm a funeral professional.
And I'm Nicholas Cappaulli, psychologist.
Hey, Nick, let's talk about death.
Let's do it.
All right, audience out there. This is going to be a very special episode. We have Cappaulli, our older brother, on again. And there's been a lot of life changes and a lot of different business changes since last time he was on. So we're going to get into that today. So Cappaulli, thank you for coming on again.
As always, it's a pleasure and a privilege.
Always. I mean, with these two brothers, I'm sure it is. So we're going to talk a little bit about all the kind of changes and things that you've been going through. So we kind of talked about you were already starting the apprentice situation with Dad and I, and you've been doing that now and filling in and helping in the secretarial work as well. But now you've done a lot of big changes. One is that you've decided to go back to school for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
And then the other was you made a big move for the funeral home and you moved right across the street.
Right across the street.
So not only does me, Benny, live right next to the funeral home now, but literally kitty corner to the funeral home, now you live.
It's unbelievable. It's a triangle of fun.
I bet it is. So first, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the actual, because I know a lot of listeners out there always wonder, like, how is it to be not only the son of a funeral director, but how is it to live next to the funeral home, right? We talk about it. So in the little bit that you've lived there, have you seen a lot of the things we've kind of talked about? Is there anything that's kind of caught you off guard?
So from the perspective of across the street, right? So wake up in the morning, look out the window. I see the funeral home. I see Benny and Den's house. Incredible, right? I love Ida. I grew up in Ida. I mean, I did move away. And it felt right coming back. And it's incredible to me how, like, it feels like being home, like I never left. So, but to your point about noticing things that I didn't notice living in Monroe, people stop by random. Like somebody will stop by at 9:00 at night and they're knocking on the door, or we're getting, random calls. Like I can actually hear the bells sometimes, depending on where I'm at in the house or what I'm doing. I can hear the call bell, which is insane. Like I've never, I hear it during, when I'm at work, but I never really expected to hear it like on my porch or when I'm in the kitchen. So I am noticing what you're talking about.
Can we talk about that? How does that actually equate? Like, how does that emotionally, when you hear the bell, when you're not at work, do you have like a little bit of like anxiety when the bell goes off, even though you're not working?
I do, but it depends on the time. Like realistically, if people are going to call, it's 9 to 5 is a normal business day. So if it's 8:00, it's like, SpaghettiOs. Like that's most likely going to be a call. And then it's, kind of getting into, I'm going to have to get ready to go over there, get in my suit and kind of prepare for it. But sometimes it doesn't. So that's where that anxiety comes in. You never really know what that ding is going to be.
And let's just for the audience to understand what we're talking about, the call bell. We have a phone system, but also we have literally old like fire station bells on the outside of our funeral home. So if we're like out gardening or mowing the lawn or walking over to get the paper, we can hear when the phone rings. And that's always fun when you're on the far end of the other parking lot and you hear the phone ring and you want to get to it before 3 rings are up, which is almost impossible, but that's a small town. So yeah, when he talks about the bell, he's talking about the actual phone ringing. We have bells outside the funeral home that rings. So he can hear that from when he's actually at home, when he's not working here. So I just wanted to explain that to the listener.
And they're believe it or not, the bells are really loud. Like my kids, my little girls, for the longest time were afraid of them, especially if you're standing under them or nearby, because you don't expect it. And they're loud enough, to Benny's point, where you're hearing them across the street. So like I live across the street right by the parking lot. You can hear it from the parking lot. That's how loud it is. It's crazy.
It's weird though, because it's almost like, I'm gonna assume for the town, the same like a fire bell. Like to firemen, they automatically know what that sound is. They go for it. But for you as like somebody, we live in the town, we can hear our fire bells too. You kind of forget about it after, after the first ring, because you're like, oh, the fire is going on. But like to us, that means like, oh, we're going on. So Cappaulli, going back to that, in the first week you moved in, I think you and I went on 3 calls.
Yes.
And I think they were all night calls.
Yes. And that was like, by the way, that was like trying to like move in, right? Like trying to get all the stuff in, unpack. We got the 3
Yeah,
calls.
but I'll be honest with though, I think that's a great experience for you. Like, because you don't really know how that feels. Like, we always talk about the crazy times. Like Dan and I was like, oh, I remember that year we had 11 calls in 2 weeks, or I remember when I had to get up 3 nights in a row. But you don't really know what that feels like until you experience it. So you moving in and experiencing 3 death calls with not only you but your fiance and your family, I'm sure that was a great wake up call in some ways. So like, talk about that. Let's talk about that death call. So let's talk about that experience. So when I call you, so you hear the bells. It's like 11 o'clock at night, and I call you. What goes through your head? Like, how does that work for you?
Well, I think it's shifting into work mode, right? Like depending on what you're doing, whether you're watching TV or whatever, it's kind of like, okay, bell's going off. This is time for brass tacks. So that's the first thing. Now, what is incredible is I am across the street. So like I literally can walk out my door and within a couple of seconds, because it's a stone throw away, I'm here. Throw a suit on. I'm ready to roll. That's, to me, the 3 calls you were talking about in the first week, the awesome part about it was I literally could walk over here and I'm ready to go. I didn't have to stress out about throwing on clothes, getting in the car, 15-minute drive. So it was a great transition into like, this is the reason why we're here, right? Like, we're here to help you guys. We're here to be a part of it. So, but being on call all that time is tough. I mean, it's always been tough, and it was harder being in Monroe because of that drive. So now that I know I'm here and I can be more available, it is less stressful. So that's great. But it's also, I'm hearing the bell though too, so I know there's a good chance when I'm hearing it that we're going on a call.
Well, and you said something to me that I think was profound too, and I think it goes back to a conversation Doc and I had when we were first going through a couple of these episodes, was how does it feel to actually be on call? So we've talked about that, where there's most nights, Chris, we aren't getting calls. I mean, we're not that funeral home that are getting calls every night. And the chances of a night call are pretty slim. They're probably like 30%, maybe something like that if you did the math. But in all honesty, though, how does that feel? I know you said one of the biggest things was, and I want you to elaborate on this, that is getting used to, is I didn't realize when you said that like mind frame of like, I could be called at any time, and the second I do something with that takes time, I'm worried about it and I'm stressed about it. Like, talk a little bit about that.
It's hard, and that is the hardest. I think honestly, the hardest part of this job, besides the emotions that are involved,
And doctors and newspapers,
anybody who's essential, anybody that's on call, busy, has to jump in. You never know when it's going to happen. So that's where the anxiety comes from, right? Like you said, we could go 4 nights with nothing. But all 4 of the nights I'm thinking, am I going to get a call at some point? Am I going to sit down and put on an episode of something and get a call? Or am I going to start a project and get a call? That is stressful. That is 100% stressful. So but living in Ida, that's the beauty of it though. I'm so close to it that if it does happen, okay, I'm right here. Everything's good to go. It happened on New Year's. Literally. So New Year's Eve, the ball dropped. And I got a call from Benny. Benny had to go home. Benny calls me. I'm thinking he's calling me to wish me Happy New Year. And it's like, I need you to get your suit on.
Well, I did say Happy New Year.
You did.
I did say Happy New Year.
But the focus wasn't Happy New Year.
The focus was, I'm sure you
Happy New Year, P.S. Get your suit on and get your butt over here.
I'm sure you could tell by my like demeanor too. I'm sure it wasn't like, because here's the thing. I'm not saying all of you listeners out there feel this way, but when most of you get like a job opportunity, I'm sure you're really excited for the most part for most of your jobs. For Chris and I, it's a double-edged sword, because yes, it's important to keep working, and yes, it's important to keep clients and have the building keep going and running. but that call means that somebody died. So there's this business side of you that's like struggling with the empath side of being a professional and caring about the families that you serve. So when that call goes off at 2:00 in the morning, it's not a sigh of relief. It's almost nerve wracking. It's almost, and I get why, because it's very hard to explain. Because there's part of me that's really excited to help this family with one last thing that I can do for them. I think that's very important. But I also think like I'm gonna have to go to this person's house or hospital bed and pick up their loved one. Like the death has occurred. So that took a lot for me in the first couple of years. And I think Cappaulli, if I'm not putting words in your mouth, I think you're kind of going through that. Is like, wow, this is, I heard Dad and Benny complain or talk about this or vent about this years ago, but like it must be different when you're experiencing it. Like I've been 10 years licensed, so it's hard for me to remember what that first year or 2 years looks like. How do you feel about that?
No, it's definitely the more invested I get, the more I'm seeing that, and I think it's the more we keep saying stressful, but even more just you're really pouring yourself into the job. So there are times that you're going to be exhausted. There are times that you're going to be emotionally drained. For me, going back to the New Year's situation, what also is very hard is the realization that somebody is losing somebody on New Year's too. Like that's hard. Like we're all home, hanging out with the kids, having fun, staying up late, partying. And then you get this call like, wow, that sucks. That person lost somebody special and important to them on a holiday. And how are they going to deal with that? And every year, every New Year's, that's going to be a reoccurring thing. That's really, it's a tough pill to swallow.
And it's also hard when they say, like, the humbling side too. It's hard when you get there and they say, "I'm so sorry I had to call you here on New Year's," right? So they're noticing too that we're leaving our families and doing it too. So there's also this like humbling experience too, where it's like, well, you don't have to say sorry. Like this is what we chose to do, but that's kind of nice of you to understand that. And I do find, especially when families do go out of their way to kind of realize the humanity behind it, that we left our families on New Year's. We didn't get to able to really kiss our wives a long time, and so it's tough. It's dualistic really, because we're happy to take care of the family, but we're not happy to take the call because that's grief. That's emotionally, somebody has lost somebody that they love. So yeah. So going back to that, Cappaulli, I want to kind of delve into this. So the let's say the three main parts of what we do. You got the first call, embalming, all that. You got the arrangement, and then you got the visitation, funeral. Those three parts, what is the hardest part for you for what we do?
Sometimes the downtime is tough. So like if you have a long visitation and you have a couple of hours where it's real quiet, that's tough because you're not moving, you're not doing stuff, you're kind of waiting. Parking cars is tough when you're outside and it's super cold and you're out for 2 to 4 hours parking. Like there's like physically challenging parts, and then there's like emotionally stressful parts.
Well, let's get the Doc Nick psychology. What is the emotional hardest part of this job for you?
Anytime that there's going to be young families, kids,
okay,
that's brutal. That's where my empath kicks in, and I think about my kids, I think about my families, and I can't understand what that person's going through. So it's this cycle of you feel bad, you feel pain, you feel hurt, you're saddened. That's awful. And I think we've shared on prior episodes some of the experiences we've had with kids and stuff. It's not even fair.
What are some of the things that you're seeing that kind of drive you nuts? Like, what are the things that are maybe outside of our control or maybe inside of our control that you find that like, wow, why do we deal with this?
We pride ourselves in bending over backwards for our families. We love our families. We want to honor them. We want to serve them. It's a vocation for us. But I do think there's times that's unfortunately taken advantage. To your point about somebody dropping off flowers at 10 o'clock at night, there's weird things that are like, we do have lives, we do have kids, we do have families, we do have stuff that we do too. Yes, we are a 24/7 business, but you still have like normal business hours and you have when we're on call. So if it's not necessarily something vital, critical, or crucial, do we really need to be popping in at 10 o'clock to, try to talk about a stone sale or something? I don't know. And maybe that's unfair. Like, grief affects everybody differently. I'm still kind of learning and understanding that process. I just also feel like, well, it's a family business and they're always open, so we can just stop by whatever and they're going to drop what they're doing for us. And that's not everybody, and that's not even most of the families. It's just those one-off situations that are kind of like, really? It's just weird for me. I'm not used to that,
What are the takeaways that you've learned from me, Benny, Dad, and maybe even Doc Nick, with things that have helped you through this beginning portion of your career?
Well, I mean, it's always been like, respect has always been instilled in us. So that's always been a great kind of foundation to build from. I think with you guys, as you specifically, Benny, is just like, take things one step at a time, one day at a time. Don't stress out about stuff that we don't even know if it's going to be the case. Just kind of roll with the punches. I think for me, I am a very anxious person, and I am not a pessimist, but it's very easy for me to get overwhelmed with, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens?
A realist, right?
You
It'd be closer to a realist.
I'm not a pessimist.
You're not a negative Nancy.
No,
but
it's
you're
more like,
whoa, I want to be prepared for if this happens. Whereas more, I'm like, don't worry about it unless it doesn't happen. What if you learn from Dad?
well,
What
like,
is your big thing?
We've talked about, like, that's something that, like, Dad struggles with sometimes too. Dad is worried sometimes about things before they happen, and I think that it's rubbed off on me. That's just my personality too. Sometimes you just got to be like, you know what, we're doing great right now. If there's a problem, we'll deal with it. We'll cross that bridge. Well, how many times have you said we'll cross that bridge when it comes, right?
But I think for young funeral directors out there, I do want to make this clear. There is a lot of things out of our control, and some of that we do have to worry about. But I very strongly challenge you to not worry about the things that you can't control, and don't put yourself in, well, what if this happens? Because nine out of 10 times it's not. And the 1 out of 10 times, it is better to just kind of deal with it when you're dealing with it than stress on it. Stress is just anxiety, and anxiety leads to anger, and that's what leads to burnout. So, I mean, Chris, it's a great point, but I want to go back. So that's Benny. What about Dad? What's the big thing you've taken from Dad?
Dad. Well, no, Dad.
There's
no.
so many
No,
nuggets.
no.
There's so many nuggets that just go.
There's
to
a wealth. There's a wealth when it comes
Shout
to
out
Dad.
to Dad out there.
It just to pick like something specific.
What's the biggest thing that you take from Dad that really hits you? It may not even be something he says.
I love the way that Dad connects with the families. I love Dad's work ethic. Absolutely love it. Dad is just, he's living, breathing, dying the funeral profession, and I love that about him. Like, I love how much he cares about his families, and he literally would do anything for he loves his community, and we do too. It's a great community to be a part of, and I think Dad's dedication. Dad is just, his dedication to everything he does it's amazing. It's impressive. So that would be something I take from Dad, that I strive to be a better funeral assistant. To, when I do go through school and become an actual funeral director, like, I want to be, the best, or at least strive for that. And I see a lot of that in Dad. He's definitely our role model. I mean, would you agree?
Well, yeah. I mean, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be talking on this podcast. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing if Dad didn't do what he did, and his dad didn't do what he did, and his dad didn't do what he did. I mean, we're definitely products. And I think even some of our things that we drive Dad nuts, I'm sure, if he could be honest, is because we are so comfortable with this position that we're in, because we were lucky enough and privileged enough to be in this. We wouldn't be so challenging sometimes what Dad does if we didn't respect him. I think that comes into kind of our punk ethos too, Chris. I think we always had kind of we're going to kind of fight the authority a little bit one way or another.
Yeah, and it's a challenge and it's a struggle sometimes, and I think that's a generational thing. I think we're obviously younger, and we got things that we believe in and want to, challenge and whatnot. But hey, going back to something you had said earlier that I wanted to touch on, you talked about like newer funeral directors kind of coming into the fold and advice for them. The one big piece I would give, honestly, is really focus on the vocation piece of it. Like, realize that the reason that you're doing this, yes, you're going to get paid. Yes, it's a job, da-da-da-da-da. But at the end of the day, the reason you're doing this is because not everybody can. So you want to set positive examples. You want to be a leader when it comes to that. We had, a visitation today where I had so many amazingly positive conversations with family members. And I'm talking all different generations, right? All different age brackets that were just so happy to be here. And they were so proud of the way things were set up and the way we handled situations and helped them. And, it was a very, very amazingly positive experience and feeling for me tonight. And I've had this happen before. It's just, to me, we're talking about it and it literally happened a couple hours ago. That's who you're doing this for. You're doing it for these families. You're doing it to help them get through. And it's not to say that you're not going to make mistakes. And it's not to say that, there isn't a learning curve, but you just keep trying and you just, I think you be honest. I think you treat people with respect and kindness, and you will be surprised at what you get back. It is super rewarding when you have a family member come and give you a hug. When a family member comes and tells you, like, I can't believe the way you made mom look, or I can't believe the way that you talk to my kids. Like, that's what you shoot for. That's what's, it's an amazingly awesome, deep feeling.
I think the most important thing for all funeral directors out there, we tend to get so lost in the mundane day-to-day, the things that need to get done, when really we need to stop and smell the roses. We need to stay in the present. We need to focus on what's important. And every once in a while, take those mental pictures like they tell people at weddings. Like, take the mental pictures of you watching the family grieve together, and the smiles and the laughs, as well as the tears and the wails. They're important. Everything is important when it comes to grief. And realize they couldn't do that if we weren't doing what we're doing. And I think that's the most important. Now, Cappaulli, you know what time it is?
Q&A, everyone loves that Q&A.
Q&A. Everybody loves that Q&A.
Q-N.
Hey.
Hey, all right. Cappaulli, we got a good one for you. All right. Randy, I'm going to put you on the spot because I know you love that. Cappaulli loves being put on the spot.
I love being put on the
all
spot.
Right, here, first thing that comes to mind, completely honest. Maybe I'm not even in the room, so take me out of the equation.
But you're sitting right next to me.
Well, you got to do it. How do you honestly feel about working for your younger brother, Benny?
I love it. I would say it's, like, to me, it's a privilege to be able to work with my family. We've talked about this before. I do love working with you, Benny. You're incredible. There are times that you drive me up the wall.
Can you elaborate on that?
Can you
elaborate on what drives you up the wall?
Well, there's times, that I don't know. It's just, the regular sibling nonsense. I don't know. There's nothing specific that comes to mind right now. Sometimes I think you want me to be around more than I need to be around sometimes, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. It's I'm trying to think of an example. It's, again, you're putting me on the spot here. So, and I think your Benisms drive me up the wall sometimes. When you're trying to be
Can
clever.
you describe to the listener what a Benism is?
Benism is, like, what are they called? Idioms or something like that? Like those were like, two in the bush is better than in the house or whatever. Like those weird, I can't think right now. But Benny, like, kind of takes those and twists them. He has his own little versions of them that really don't make any sense. And he tries to apply.
Wait. But at the end of the day, can you understand them?
More or less.
It's kind of a read between the lines kind
a
of situation, but it's a reach, right?
What are those called? They're not idioms. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, yeah.
Absolutely, I know what you're talking
I can't
about.
think of the word right now. But I kind of feel idioms. Thank you. I kind of feel like idioms exist for a reason. So why fix something that isn't broken? So the fact that Benny has to put his own flippy dippy on it is a little obnoxious at times. And also, Ben likes praise, and he likes to talk about how awesome he is all the time. That gets a little much too. Like,
okay, the last question. Doc Nick hasn't talked a lot in this podcast. But here's my question: what have you learned about yourself during this process of becoming a funeral professional?
That this is an easy one. This is truly what I've always wanted. I did run away from this for a long time, and some valid reasons, some silly reasons, but to be back in Ida, to be across the street from my brothers, to constantly see my parents, for all of our kids to play together, um, literally to have an amazing household with an amazing fiance. Like, there's just so many incredible things that have happened in the past year, 2 years, but specifically last year, because last year was a lot of like soul searching with, do I want to go back to school? I recently took on taking over Obits. There's been a lot of movement in 2022 leading right into the first of this year. I'll say on a side note that moving in December was probably one of the hardest and most challenging things to do. We didn't have a lot of time. We moved when it was cold. The fact that it lined us up to start the new year here has been unbelievable. Just all the quality time I've already had since the beginning of December is unbelievable. Like, I'm seeing my brothers not just at work, but like, we're getting the kids together and we're playing outside and we're running food back and forth from household to household. I got brothers coming over helping me with projects. And then on top of all that, I literally work, like 10 steps from my job. So I'm not driving to work every morning. I'm not having a drive home from work. I can literally be done and go home. Sometimes I'm fortunate enough to have breaks where I can go to my house and hang out there for half an hour before that's to me, I'm finally home. And it's took me a lot of time, like a long time, to realize that. But it's probably the greatest gift I could ever have, is being here. And I'm ecstatic to see what the future is going to bring with that.
Well, and we're going to keep this going, Cappaulli. We'll have you on a couple more during this process of your professionalism. I'm sure some of these ideas, thoughts are going to change. For you listeners out there, if you have any questions for Cappaulli or anybody who's thinking about going into mortuary science, whether that be embalming or funeral directing, and have any questions for me or Cappaulli, please reach us at letstalkaboutdeathpod@gmail.com. Please listen to us, send us out, subscribe us, star us. Cappaulli, if you're not talking about death,
Then you ain't living.